Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to our fifth talk in the AI in Education series. My name is Patrick Buckland, and what we're going to do today is we have very lucky to have Dr. Zeta Dooly with us to talk about AI in research. But before I begin, just to note that any AI agents, we would prefer that you would ask us before bringing them into the to talk, just for privacy reasons. And what we're going to do, I'll just give you a little bit of an introduction of Dr. Dooly, and what she'll do, she'll take over then. So Dr. Dooly is a lecturer in digital education. She's a researcher and supervisor at the Faculty of Education and Lifelong Learning at SETU, Southeast Technological University. She's also a program lead for the postgraduate certificate in technology enhanced learning and lectures on the Masters in Education program and EU Connexus PhD program. Zeta has led and participated in the funded research from the European Commission, H2020, Horizon Europe, and also other national agencies such as the HEA, HSE, and National Forum Enterprise Ireland. Dr. Dooly's research includes digital education, innovative pedagogies, AI, extended reality in education, education and sustainable development, and links between people, learning, and technology. And recently, she was awarded with research grants, which included the establishment of ICAIRE Lab, which is Southeast Education Research Lab at SETU. Dr. Dooly was also awarded the SETU Early Career Research Award in 2023 and shortlisted for SETU's Teaching Excellence Award in 21. Also, finally, she's on the governing body of SETU and previously served on Academic Council and is active on initiatives in relation to policies and governance of generative AI. So it was with great pleasure. I will turn the time over now to Zeta, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Thanks, Zeta.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks, Catherine, for the invitation to come here today and to have a talk with you. I've shared a Padlet with Pat, and I'll share my slides and stuff too, but I'm just going to go in there now and start. Thanks for the nice introduction as well. Okay, so can you see my slides okay? You might give me the thumbs up, Pat, if...
Yeah, I can see it fine. I can see it perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. So look, today I'm just going to give you a bit of a whirlwind about some of the areas that I've been involved with over the last few years in relation to strategies for using AI in research. And as we will all do now, we put up the real photo and then we put up the AI generated photo. So that makes us look a lot younger. And because I've been around research for such a long time, it is really helpful. So as Pat said, I'm a lecturer in digital education in SETU, and I have a bit of an unusual background. I've only been lecturing for 5 years in SETU, but I've been with SETU for 20 years now. 14 of those years was working with the Walton Institute in cybersecurity research with the European Commission. And prior to that, I was in industry. So I just said, fine, look, I'll introduce myself to a degree, looking at that kind of different roles that many of us play in our universities, potentially as lecturers, supervisors, trying to keep up like today with our own CPD, looking at trying to establish new research groups and disrupt the way things are happening. Being a researcher ourselves so that we can publish, but also being a supervisor researcher where we're publishing with students, and then trying to extend our external collaborations and community contributions. So things like Autism Friendly Waterford was just recently accredited by As I Am as the first city in Ireland to be autism friendly. And ICAIRE Lab, as Pat mentioned, is the new lab that we have looking at VR in education. And the Digital Education Conference is something that I've been working on for a few years here in SETU, bringing educators and policymakers and industry people together. Prior to that, I worked in Ericsson, Westpac, New Publish, Sun Life, Walton, before I arrived here in the Faculty of Education. The reason I'm putting this up is because it was all to do with databases, to do with pseudocode and SQL and having the accuracy of data, which is now so important. And when I went to move from industry into academia, it was my master's in education, or sorry, a master's in knowledge management that I did with Sun Life Financial, because they're based in the US, and many of the processes and standards that they did, I was interested to document about that and find some findings. So for today's agenda, I said, okay, I'm actually going back to use much more of my own photographs in some of my slides. So this is just from Austria, actually, and it's a tree view. But is AI actually even enhancing our productivity, looking at insight and innovation? Is it transforming our academic research workflows? And I'm hoping that today's talk, and some of you might be able to also contribute to that within Padlet or somewhere in the chat in relation to, is it changing our academic research workflows? So we're going to look at the evolving stuff. I say stuff a lot because I have very limited vocabulary sometimes, the maturity models and the standards, to examine our own research process and to explore a couple of areas of interest, put some practical tips and ethical considerations. So hopefully that meets your expectations as to what you were hoping to get from today's talk. So I put up Turing there as well in 1947. What he said was trying to create or trying to develop and research is a machine that can learn from experience. And here we are today in relation to fears of missing out, trying to make sure that we have digital competency and literacy metrics. But lots and lots of our colleagues and students aren't really sure where they fit on that digital competency map or in that relation to that literacy. But a lot of it's coming into time sucking. We go down a little pathway, we spend ages there trying to find what we can do to increase our productivity, increase our insights. And it keeps pushing that scope of what task we're actually doing and trying to, I think this is my opinions, as I said, about where that is fitting into our daily academic workflows. So as Pat mentioned, I like things like digital education, AI ethics, biographic narrative, interpretive methods, knowledge management, policy, innovation, education, experimentation. I fall back to Fawns, who's passionate about the entanglement of pedagogy, the emergence of artificial intelligence and the possibilities for positive social impact. And you'll see in today's talk, especially when we go down to the apps that we use for different things, is that if it doesn't have an impact, then why are we trying to figure out how to use it better? I keep going back to, well, what are we supposed to be doing here? How do we measure what we want to do? And I think the SDGs should be at the forefront, or the fundamentals and the foundations of all of that. Okay, so you can get the slide to move on. Why then, of course, I started with ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini to say, okay, what will I do for today's talk? Why use AI in academic research? Speeds up things, literature reviews, data analysis, enhances our writing, aiding to look at the gaps and the trends and looking at the data synthesis and simulation. And then it gives out a bucket of AI tools for researchers. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with some of those. And that's good. It looks like it's reliable. It looks like it's accurate. But, you know, where am I supposed to go with this? I suppose it comes into the stay updated as the tools evolve and join AI communities and seminars. It's telling us to go back to people and humanistic interventions and to balance that efficiency with ethics. It gave me about 15 slides. I'm just giving you an extract here from them. But in one of those slides, it said as well, where future research, it was really boring. And I said I'd had to spend ages editing that. So it has pros and cons. It also said to start small, to integrate slowly. And it's very much connected, I think, to one of the principles that CAST has in relation to universal design for learning +1 scenario. So begin with one AI tool that meets a need, use it to support, not to replace judgment, and keep a log of tools that work for you. So it sounds sensible. So then I said, okay, for AI research that I use, I gave a whole bucket of things. And I'm going to today just look at 2 or 3 of them. I'm going to see what the students say, because as I said, I teach on the level 9s and level 10s, and a lot of my students, as part of their assignments and assessments, have to evaluate these tools: AI for research tools, AI for teaching and learning tools. And then I put a lot at the bottom of that there, some of the AI powered tools just from Canva. So I think we get overwhelmed with the amount of things that are out there. And then we also, I think, from my perspective, I like to be able to dip in and out, and therefore I find myself platform agnostic. I don't really care which app I use for different things. I start to use them all. So for today, as I said, I'm going to have a quick look at author. Pat told me that one of the previous series had a look at Notebook LM. I don't think we've looked at ThinkStat yet, but I think that Napkin AI might have been one of the ones too. And one of my students used Napkin AI. We suggested it for doing her ethics application, for coming up with some new diagrams, for trying to do her conceptual map, things like this. And it's a really helpful, useful tool. Okay, so what did the students say? David Roach used ThinkStack. So the ThinkStack application was able to help him make an AI chatbot that he could custom train to only use certain data. So that gave him that federated database, which is really important so that he wasn't fearful that it was going to be trained on incorrect data. And I saw that one of the previous sessions that you had here in this seminar series as well from, oh, I can't remember the name, sorry, but it was from the University of Limerick guys, I think. And they said the first thing to do is to tick off the setting so that you're not sharing your data to train the model. So this tool, ThinkStack, helps you to do that kind of thing. And then he decided that he would use it as a useful tool to help students find content, ask questions 24/7. He was teaching online in the evening time as the lifelong learning part of SETU. And he just felt that it was essentially having your own AI teaching assistant. And it also meant that students could ask questions that they didn't get to ask in class, because we know that we're very time constrained in class. So then he embedded it into his digital portfolio, because that was the actual assessment, just using copy and paste function or the embedded function. And then it meant that he was able to embed it onto his Google site. So we're starting to embed and add on and integrate and make sure that there's compatibility between one app and the other. And I think that that's a really interesting part of using AI for research, so that we can potentially build our own toolkit. And if you go back to the book that Phil Race and also Sally Brown, two professors from the UK, a toolkit for lecturers and researchers, it's really building that toolkit, and how do we do that for research is really important. Okay, then Muji decided that he would have a look at AI author or Aethor. And the AI tool is designed to support academics and researchers in streamlining various aspects of their research workflow. And he felt that this tool could be useful for him in a variety of ways in relation to research writing assistance, generating content, asking it to assist in creating well-structured drafts for research papers, articles, and thesis documents, and providing grammar checking and coherent and field-specific content. And Muji suggested that it was particularly useful for where English isn't somebody's first language. So similar to Notebook LM as well, it summarises lengthy documents, research papers and literatures into concise summaries, making it easier to extract key insights. And another one of my PhD students is using, it begins with the C, I can't remember, a systematic review tool for their literature review. I'll put that into the Padlet afterwards as well. Sorry about that. And then citations and references, how the tool can help format citations and create reference lists in all the different styles. And many of the EndNote and BibTeX and LaTeX plugins that we use now for research have an AI component to that, which is really, really clever for us to make sure that we're able to maybe accelerate how we use different add-ins for that. So Muji said that it can be really used for literature review optimization, data analysis and visualization, collaboration, communication, and proposal grant writing and budget justifications. So have many of you used Aethor or ThinkStack? Any of those new to you? The last student then that I'm using as an example today was Margaret, and she demonstrated the Notebook LM. Let me see if I can see the chat. No, that's okay. Oops, sorry, back to... So Margaret used Notebook LM to upload lecture resources, lecture slides, academic articles and handouts to create podcasts in the form of audio podcasts with the specialist subject, and then limiting that podcast to just the resources to uploaded. And that's similar to the issue I raised earlier on when Dave said that he could do the same thing with ThinkStack. So it was useful to give a student an overview of a topic in an engaging way, different multiple modes of engagement, similar to the UDL concept that we talked about earlier on, and that the app appears to be good at drawing out simple examples which help the learner, and these are automatically generated through the artificial intelligence bots, so that it helps the learner. It doesn't have to be it's taught through the system rather than the actual person navigating it or guiding it. So in addition to the podcast, produce a summary of your content that students can interrogate by entering questions. The questions are drawn from the material provided, and Margaret was keen that her students could use it as a study aid and that they wouldn't curate the content into it, that they would manage it themselves. So I'm just going to out of that and maybe just quickly, this is the Think Stack. This is Margaret. So we were using Book Creator and stuff to do the online portfolios. And you can just see here, she used Business Model Canvas. She plugged in a number of different documents, and then she was able to get her students to ask questions, to use the podcast and things like that. Think smarter, not harder. And the same then ICAIRE, AI-powered research assistant. And then that brings us back to these slides here. So as I said, it's bringing in some of the aspects or the comments from students in relation to that. Okay, so there's some thoughts. What is artificial intelligence? One of our colleagues, PJ Wall, is in TUD, said that it's no longer as stable as science fiction. It's actually influencing many aspects of our life and looking at streaming services, whom we interact with, what interest rates were offered, things like that. And he's developed the ethical canvas. That's a really good tool there when we want to talk about it with our students or with our research collaborators and our partners. So when Pat originally asked, will I come on to the seminar series, and I was thinking of AI as a research assistant, I went back to some of the AI image generators, and this is what we came up as. And I used to use Midjourney for this one. I just used the extensions of ChatGPT, and that was, as I said, the first diagram or the image that I got. And then I said, oh no, make it more realistic, because it's much more clever these days, isn't it? So we decided, oh yeah, make it much more realistic, get our prompts a bit better, ask it more questions. And then eventually I was able to put myself and Pat into that research assistant document. And you can see myself and Pat have never actually sat at a table together and done research. So it was, as I said, all I did was upload some photos. And as I said, this is where I think our Midjourney about 2 or 3 years ago started. And Midjourney was a paid for license, and only people like myself were coming in on the game like that. But as I said, here we have now what we're able to do for free is that we can upload all sorts of different diagrams into our documents, as Margaret and David and Yuji illustrated too. It has the capability, has extended significantly. And that makes us both funny, happy and delighted, but also very nervous. And that's why a colleague of mine from Australia that works with children and digital education and with children, and they've recently changed their laws for, under 16s using social media and stuff. That's why, because we can, obviously, there's so much risk in relation to pornography or images that people can now share and put someone's face on something that just isn't really useful, is it? But for this one, as I said, it's pretty impressive that me and Pat can look like we actually came together to do some research. So learning in the age of AI towards imaginative futures. I think that's really important, that we look at the abstract as well as the kind of the actual. And the Eden Conference in 2024 had loads and loads of papers on that. And this year the conference will as well. So collaboration on AI, the ethics and social technical futures in higher education is really important. The transdisciplinarity of that, and looking at intricate questions about knowledge and co-creation and knowledge legitimization, the narratives of AI and the reimagined futures. So I mentioned briefly using Midjourney, and I did use Midjourney an awful lot. I don't use it anymore, but I did come up with this diagram maybe about 2 years ago, and I gave it prompts and whatever, and I decided then that it was really useful because it made us use Discord. And Discord is like chat, or is like the instant messaging system. Like Teams, it's a little bit different, but in order to generate the prompt engineering for images, Midjourney forced you into this area of Discord, and it meant that you're in all different groups all of a sudden, and you could see what other people's prompts were for their images, and you automatically got better and better at your own prompt engineering. So I've suggested here, many of the universities I know today, SETU being one of them, uses LinkedIn Learning for CPD. And you may or may not have a license for that, but it's really, really useful if you want to do a short course on prompt engineering. You can start with basic, they have intermediate, they have advanced prompt engineering. And I just think that, in some cases, that's where is the difference between people who are using AI really, really cleverly for research and people who are not so sure where they want to go. It's often in relation to their prompts and their prompt engineering knowledge. So go out there and get at it. This is an old one as well, using AI image generator to aid learning, looking at turbulence of learning. Oops, sorry. In challenging times and looking for learning metaphors. And I find with my students, both at first year of their PhD or at fourth year of their PhD, is that trying to get metaphors as to areas for discussion, to find the gaps, to get the conceptual maps is really important. And that's one of the things that we can do here in our AI apps, is to extend our knowledge, as I said, of that prompt engineering, but that's just refining and getting more closer to what we're actually looking for. And that's exactly what we're doing when we're trying to define our problem or research question. So there's a bit of turbulence there. Okay, brought you back then to like the DIKW pyramid, because I mentioned at the start that knowledge in relation to the data, looking at discrete facts, observations, and that's where we're looking at the transparent validity and the hallucinations within AI, collecting the parts. And this is Jeff Waters' updated model, but this model has been going around since the 1990s in relation to data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I'm still advocating for humans being part of that wisdom at the top. But we do have, as I said, with Turing and the different models that are there, we're getting closer and closer to be able to add context and experience so that machines are able to get to the knowledge and wisdom stages of that triangle. Okay, and then I said I'd start looking at the worries and the opportunities, because we really do have in research, we have a fear of releasing new knowledge, because once it's released into the whole community of research, then there can be an impact on somebody's viva, and that is potentially where some of the fear is that if we're releasing publications before they're published, if we're releasing data, have we then given away our own actual critical data and releasing it into the wild? And then the other side of it is around cheating, not deserving of an academic award, the cost to the environment, and the negative impact potentially on our organizations or on our own personal reputation. I think that's where we need to do that balancing act about where our usefulness of AI tools for research can be really clever, and then where actually that is the risk for that. And then the other flipped side of the coin is that really can have huge positive impact on our reputation. By being cleverer at doing research, the global impact can be much more accelerated. We can get to the stage potentially of saving lives, curing cancer, making peace, eradicating poverty, all very important things in our current environment where we live in Trump tariff world, I suppose. AI then is multidimensional, and I suppose that's rather than spend the 45 minutes of the talk today, I am looking at particular apps. I said we need to also look at that non-technical elements, the discursive, the narrative, the legitimization, the reimagined meanings of knowledge. But what can we use things for? I went to an event in SETU Carla last week, and one of my colleagues, Brian Casey, was showing how it could do a full course for me. It can actually even do the assignment. And I think that's really, really useful sometimes, but it's also like, there you may not remember what the course is. If you can do a program to do something, it depends if you're ticking boxes for your CPD or whether you actually want to learn and take in the different kinds of new knowledge that you need to do your job more effectively. So I think that doing new courses for me isn't really part of that. And I think that I prefer to do the course, but I might put the pace of the videos potentially up to double time, or I might skip parts of it and get the AI to fast forward elements of it and then to focus on the bits that I like. An executive function for big voluminous meetings where I contribute to decision making. If I've got 30 documents to look at and I've just been given them on Friday and the meeting's on Monday, I'm obviously going to use some AI app so that I can get to the summarization of that. And if I'm looking for the decision making, I'm not going to rely upon it unless I dig deeper into the bits that I think are risky. For AI reviewers, for journals, for reviewing conferences, I'm not using it for that at the moment, but that is where some of it is going. And I think that what we need to think about, I've got some models just in a minute, is to say, well, which ones are we comfortable with? Are we comfortable with AI supervision? Are we comfortable with AI coding? Where we get the first iteration of analysis, so long as you can happy that you can trust it. Don't you want to be able to go back to the dirty data? Go back to the actual data that you've collected for your research. What's at stake here? Grant applications, thesis writing. If something's for less than 5,000, I would definitely use many of the apps to do the first iteration and then maybe inject the parts that I want to into that. And then we're moving towards really an agentic research using a futures literacy lens. It's pretty important. So what I've done is in the next few slides, I've introduced you to some of the gurus in this space. The social construction of AI, algorithms, data and code engender political, social and ethical dimensions. Usage really is socially shaped. Healthcare, work, politics and policing, agency versus structure focused both emotions, complexity of the everyday and politics of empowerment, the decolonization of AI, public scholarship. So just when we are looking at agentic AI, I said we need to go back to what does that actually mean? Is it capable of achieving outcomes independently? In other words, is it able to describe someone who has the agency and the power to act, has a tool, has a non-humanistic element, have the power to act, I suppose. So these are just a couple of tips. The AI in Education Almanac, Exploring EdTech, Mary Plastick's new book. She also suggests, and this is on LinkedIn. I think it's LinkedIn's great for helping me collate many of the gurus in the space. And I think that now that, well, I don't use X anymore. I do use Blue Sky a bit, but I do think a lot of the conversation, a lot of the critical thinking and analysis is there in LinkedIn as well. So look, Mairead was just suggesting yesterday, the day before, to start using Future House. What is the latest research on labour market? She's giving our tests here. And how can we look at that? And she's giving the recreation of that test so that she's documenting it. And that's really, really helpful. As I said, many humans are really keen to share their knowledge and to share their experiments and to look at the insights that it's employing. Another guy that I would really suggest is Bernie Goldbach at TUS, and he uses Readwise. So he's teaching AI for personal productivity. And there's some of the examples. So these are the kind of, when I'm suggesting gurus, I would go back and look at the detail, because obviously we don't have that much time today to go through loads and loads of stuff. Dahio Muraku, navigating the new frontier of using AI assistance, navigating educational transformation. Dahi has done great papers, and he's used 15 different blogs to critically discuss the pros and cons of things like agentic AI and the moral taxonomy of AI assistance. And then I mentioned that I use the VR in my classrooms now. So if I'm looking to work up pilots or look up, as I said, when I'm doing new grants for getting new equipment or whatever, I always use ChatGPT or Gemini to do up those pilots to give me exactly, it'll go through the infrastructure, it'll go through how to deal with the students on the first day, what equipment you may need, what applications you may need, all that kind of stuff. And it gives you, it's really, really clever for trying to get that operational side of things. But as you can see here from Blue Sky, I've just given Paul Matthews has a worked example of AI in my history classroom, looking at that context, the task, the AI prompt, the instructions. And like that, the list of AI tools that I gave earlier on is really, really clever at doing all that kind of stuff. I hope that's useful. It is important, though, to go back and look at Leon Furs's how do we manage to do this assessment? How much AI are we allowed within our guidelines, within our policies? Many, many universities in Ireland now have policies, but they are more so, I think, guidelines than policies, because we still aren't compliant to our policies. There's no negative penalties that are metrics are quantifiable. So we can, I think that using these kind of AI assessment scales is still useful for guidelines, but I still think that we're a long way off from being able to say, well, for this, I think there should be no AI, for this, there should be full AI. I think we're very much in the middle. And I think that it's awful when you hear of maybe some lecturers saying to some PhD students, you can't use AI. You're never to use it. How are they going to be their graduate attribute when they leave their university? How can they fit into an organization that uses AI every day? So you're restricting their competency in relation to digital literacy. So I think it is useful, though, to go back to assessment scales. The citizen discourses of AI, the cost, lack of standardization, bias, ethical, moral concerns, technical limitations, fear, privacy and security. And these are exactly the same for the academic discourses of OER and other, as we've gone through kind of the OER is open education resources, and as we go through kind of the communities of open source, OSS, open systems. And I think that this is kind of showing the trends of history and how we can adopt AI cleverly into our AI research workflows. So Barry O'Sullivan and the European Digital Innovation Hubs Network and the entire project is another really great source for AI literacy, and they provide free training on the AI Act. And the reason why I brought this in here is that much of the research that we do in academia is looking for new knowledge, and therefore even right out to spin outs, our Enterprise Ireland may be trying to ensure that we're able to impact our economic landscape in Ireland, and therefore looking for IP, intellectual property, and all that kind of stuff. So even though we may be looking at different kinds of research, I think it's important that we know the boundaries of that, and that if someone has new apps that they're developing or whatever, that they will need to comply with the EU Act. And that brings us kind of to like, what is research? Why should it be important? There's big teams, there's small teams, the team's resources. So we have one PhD student who's doing research for 4 years and their research team, but then we have 10 million research projects that might be a research innovation action or a collaborative innovation action with the European Commission. And they really simplify their research into 3 sections when you're doing a European Commission proposal: excellence, implementation, impact. And that excellence is just state of the art. It's looking at the literature review, and the implementation is the whole project management of that. And the impact is then what it's going to do for our society, what it's going to do for our economics, and what it's going to do for our citizens. So back to the real photos of Kilfarcy down the road from me. Research can be dark and research can be bright, and we go through all the different phases of that. And that's quite a lonely process, whether you're one person in a team or whether you've got a team of 10 different collaborative partners from across Europe or across the world. I've split it up, as I said, into those excellence, impact and implementation, because it makes it really simple. When you're going to do a research proposal, you've got the idea, the conceptual model and the proposal part of that. And you're looking at these aspects when you're simplifying. It's the same for, as I said, a large project as it is for a small project. And I believe that for each of those elements, you should be trying to use AI so that you can get to the conceptual model, that you can get to the diagrams, you can use database management, you can look at the different sources of data, primary, secondary, tertiary. You can build custom tools yourself to execute research and to develop instruments. So, for example, I mentioned earlier on one of my PhD students using Napkin AI for our ethics application, but I've also used it for ethics applications myself, whereby I'm asking ChatGPT or Gemini or ChatPDF or whatever to actually come up with a new questionnaire, to come up with some a semi-structured interview guide, an instrument on that will need humanistic intervention post the first draft. But I'm just saying that we have all these tools at our disposal and we should definitely try to employ them. Then we can access experts, because we're not all experts on different elements of the research process, but potentially we can access experts now, like Wolfram in relation to the mathematical side of things, stats, data visualizations, and that we still have to go back and look at that data sources for our actual research data collection part. I've given the example here, project management, the research plan, the project management part of that, because as I said, each of these developing the timeline can be done online through an AI, looking at your project tracking tools such as Trello has an AI side to it now, and even refining that research question and objective to give you different iterations of your own research title and your own research questions, your sub-objectives, things like that. LaTeX, loads of the different software for scientific and technical documentation preparation now have AI integrated into them. So as I mentioned, I think in relation to using different AI apps for research, I'm really platform agnostic. And therefore, many of these are really good. And I think that it's personal preference as to what you decide on. But the idea is to get to the stage that you can do a +1 and add it to that toolkit. You can evaluate something yourself and you can bring it back. And I think that's using Brian Mathers here, illustrations, visual thinker, shows us that we then need different abstract ways of thinking and that we need that balance between using AI tools to using then, as I said, sketches and things that can give us kind of that out of the blue sky thinking and applied, as well as applied research. One of the reasons that I try to use AI as much as I can is to spend more time at the beach. And I think that we get, what's the word? Confused sometimes, that we think that using AI for our research is going to mean that we're going to be extra efficient, really, our productivity levels are going up. But at the moment, I think we're in that space where it's actually that scope creep and we can go down rabbit holes. And I think that we need to go back and reflect that we need to be time bound for each application that you start to use. You don't need 10 applications to do the same thing. You just need to start using the functionality of one application to potentially to its optimized level. And that's why I think that, is that as humans, we still collate a lot of that in our control management system of the brain, and that we need to be able to make sure that we're reaching our own objectives, both personally and professionally. So when I'm talking about the mantra, AI, if we're after getting so clever for research and for teaching and learning and pedagogy and this, that, and the other, make sure that we reflect back as to what can it be used for. And then something that I always use is the peacock, because we're also different and unique as well. And our research is different and unique. So we're collecting, as I said, those poker chips, potentially make sure not to indulge on trying to evaluate too many apps out there for designing the instrument, for analysing the codes within your narrative, biographic, or whatever it is. But do go back and use different kinds of models to validate and ensure that the reliability of your own research is important. And the Sarah Lane Eaton tenets of post-plagiarism, writing in the age of artificial intelligence, brings us right back down there. In that, how are we going to look like? Will AI writing become normal? Is it enhancing our human creativity? Is it flatlining our barriers to disabilities, to language barriers? Can we look at the accountability of that and that the attribution remains important? So I've put up the Harvard Business Review, how between 2024 and 2025, using Gen AI has changed. And you can see there that, from general advice to healthier living, is it fun and nonsense? And we are critical sometimes of the cost to the environment of using AI for research or for teaching and learning. But look, I think that we're still within that period, I suppose, of where we need to be able to evaluate it ourselves to see where exactly its usability is for us. The pair model is something that I think that's going to be really, really useful to me as a supervisor for PhD research, where you look at drafts, you're looking at peer feedback, you're looking at AI feedback, you're reflecting upon that, and you're letting your students revise drafts in relation to that. As I mentioned, one of the conferences I was at last week with SETU was looking at for what research tasks could we use different things. And I just think that we do get still overwhelmed as to trying to get that subtopics, I suppose. Is it for conceptualization? Is it for writing? There's 10 different categories there for writing, using the draft, reviewing editing, the visualization, the project administration. Like, we can get, I think, elements of all of that, but we need to try and figure out how is our own personal research academic workflow changing, and how can we optimize that? And then I just put up a little picture there from the Austrian trip in one of the scientific museums. It's all a bit of a blur sometimes, and we're all at different areas of our journey in relation to that. Just to give another example of ChatGPT Gemini, looking for creating workflows and process maps. I just chucked this into Gemini. I also chucked it into ChatGPT, and I I looked at the comparative of them both to see what kind of process map it was coming out with. I thought that they were both fine. I was able to edit them. I was able to extract them, things like that. And I said, well, what do you want to learn? I really want a TripAdvisor for AI research, but we still need to have a management control system in our head to evaluate and make decisions for you and your research. And it really is based back onto what is your research philosophy? What is your education philosophy? There's loads of food for thought. And I think that, like, as I said, I would stick with this map as to say, this is kind of how a PhD might look, but it's also how a big 10 million research proposal for Horizon Europe, or now the Framework Programme 9, which is coming on board, would look. It's got similar type chapters. And I think that we really do open different cans of worms using AI for our research. Are we ready? There's lots of enablers and barriers. We still need to be trustworthy. We need to use that ICAIRE process, the convergence in scientific and social aspects. And there, because I'm from Tramore, we're at the races, but we really need to chat about that readiness, the process, the policy, the enablers and the barriers to pave the way for successful approaches as we pilot really or adopt AI for research. And as we are, many of us, advocates for change and collective progression, others may be more apprehensive of the impact of change and its long-term impacts. I'm coming to kind of to me yapping, and hopefully some of you will have some questions and stuff. But I've just put in here, there's quite a difference in how we look at it academically versus the industry perspective. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that. I've mentioned the graduate attribute and how we need to have students ready for the outside world where AI use is ubiquitous. And I just said here, we really need to think about all these things: the authenticity, the integrity, the academic freedom, precarious contracts for research. I've come from that place. I know what tenure, knowledge owners, the data protection officers, GDPR, all this kind of stuff. Disruptive digitization and change is where we're at. It's a nice picture of, I think it's in Trinity's library. And I think that, we have managed to move from textbooks where we used to, when I was younger, have encyclopedias for our reference points, to multiple modes of learning and teaching. And we really need to look at that sense of timeliness, sense of belonging, a sense of pace, and where we want to see new perspectives for education research. The landscape is complex. There's a quadruple helix. We've got an awful lot of attributes in relation to how we manage to tightly couple them, as I said, with phones being one of the good examples there. And then, as I said, we need to be able to manage our own evaluation models about the compatibility of the different applications that we're using, the integration of those, the usability, reliability, consistency, the regulation, the etiquette. And exploring AI for research landscape, we really are decolonizing knowledge. And that's a nice picture I used at a conference with the hospital recently on using colposcopy was the topic. And I said, okay, this isn't really where we're going, but that's the futuristic scientific sci-fi type way. So that's the last picture there of the Kilfarcy. And thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, I put some questions into if I just go into Padlet to share the slides with you in case they're any good for you. Let me just find, it's here. I put my slides in there. I said maybe you could share your fears in relation to AI research, and maybe AI apps, that research that you recommend, and what kind of research are you involved with? Are they big? Are they small? This really is a community of practice that we have here today. And I believe that is the power with the people for AI research.
Thank you very much, Zeta. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. I just want to open the floor to questions. We have a couple of questions in the chat, actually, that I'll ask first. The first one is from Sandra Ryan. She mentioned that when you showed the images of me and yourself, that's actually a real image, wasn't it? Let's be honest. No, kidding. How can we identify AI-created images like this? Is it even possible?
So there's a reverse engineering image app that you can do to see if it's an actual picture and a photo or not a photo. And I used that quite a while back. I can't remember which one. I really do have a bad head. It's the old age. But all I like, the validity of these things is really tricky. And that's why I used that picture of you and me, Patrick. So I just used your profile pic from LinkedIn and my profile pic from LinkedIn. And as I said, it shows you the evolvement or how that could evolve, that all these different image apps, we have millions of them now available at our fingertips and available to us. So we just have to have our ethical hats on us. And that's why I mentioned safety for children online and how important it is. because as I said, once you go into the policy of children getting the bus to school, someone takes a photo of someone else, there is no legislative the penalties for how we merge or converge our technology is still catching up. That's my belief. And I think that we need to be, as guardians of new technology and their adoption within our organizations and within our homes, I think it's really, really important that there's a lot of danger out there and we need to be cognizant of that. Does that kind of answer the question, Pat?
Yeah, that's perfect. We've just another question from Richard. In one of the earlier talks in this series, the presenters gave an example of using AI to do a qualitative thematic analysis using Braun and Clark. Would you consider this to be problematic use of technology with ethical implications?
Well, I think it's brilliant. Okay, to use Braun and Clark's framework. For the 2006, now they have really new updated versions of that framework as well, because my own son is in UL using Braun and Clark at the moment for his thematic analysis. And I was having a discussion with them about that. So like, I think it's really good, but is it like, is it authentic enough? I think you have to intervene. Like I used Naviva for my own PhD analysis, and I used the model of Braun and Clark for the data analysis of that. But I think it's really, really clever to be able to adopt it, but then you do have to validate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same. I did the same for my PhD. And I just wonder that if, there is a danger of kind of over-reliance on AI to do the analysis, where you don't really know the data yourself. Does that make sense? Because that's part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I call that, okay, if there's a whole big theme in there, the familiarization of the data, and that's a step. In my PhD, that was a step. It was part of that process. So how can I be familiar with the data if I've outsourced it to AI? In my view, you still have to get to the nuts and bolts and be familiar with your own data.
Absolutely.
So that you don't miss any insights, because you have all this potential. You have we have skipped steps now because we don't need to transcribe it. We have help with that. So there's loads of shortcuts in some ways, but we still have to be familiar with the data. And I do believe that even if we're outsourcing some of it to fancy technology, I still think we're going to go back there and say, oh, I thought I remembered something in my head from one of those interviews that was important, or I'll go back to the actual transcribed interview.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there any questions? If anybody has a question, they can put their hand up and I can unmute you. You can ask it yourself.
Patrick, I think there's a question from Catherine, and it says, my concern is assessment integrity. Are we going to assess students' ability to use AI? She's wondering what you think, Zeta.
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. Thanks, Catherine. Because in my classrooms, as I said, I teach on the Masters in Education. So therefore, I often have lecturers, tutors from ETB, primary and post-primary school teachers. And the assessment as to, are we going to actually, is there a level of AI knowledge and literacy? I ask that question, is a level 6 different from a level 9 at the moment? How can we have standards for that? How do you know AI better than I know AI? Because it's so new. And when I worked in Ericsson, they used to have 6 months turnaround for a new product. And that really is the same time now, hundreds of years later. So I believe that there will be individual personalization of education. And therefore, in the same class, you will have people who naturally spend all their spare time getting up to date on new digital apps or AI apps. And then you'll have some people who don't have much of an interest in it. So are we going to give them a low mark of their digital competency? Or, as you say, are we going to try and have that ability? How do we, in the rubric for digital creativity in the classroom, I'm going to take the context of that person's workplace when I'm marking it into consideration. And I know that that's kind of complicated, Catherine. I'm not sure if I've answered it there, but I do think that we need students to get a certain level of AI competency. But I don't think that once they get to use that level, that there's a shorter maturity model, I think, there in being experts. I don't believe every student needs to be an expert in AI.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I have a question actually myself. what level, when you're writing a research paper, okay, or like for a journal or whatever, how much AI is appropriate? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm kind of worried that if they go check for AI and it comes up as parts of it maybe have been, influenced. No, I don't obviously just copy and paste or anything like that. So where's the line? Where's this line where you say, okay, you know, I want to use AI, but I'm kind of fearful that it'll come across as some sort of plagiarism or cheating from the journal, and then that'll cause issues.
Yeah. Well, I think, Pat, to tell you the truth, if I'm writing a paper for a journal or a student of mine is writing a paper for a journal, I like them to start without using AI, because if they've used AI for all of their workflow, operational, administrative stuff, I think that's where a lot of the savings is. I think that when you're going to do your academic writing and you're bringing it all together, that you need to have a good standard of writing.
Yeah.
And that I think that there's too much risk for me to get on a journal by using loads of AI. So therefore, I wouldn't do it. I'm really careful with these things. It's like me uploading someone's PhD chapter into an AI bot at the moment. I still won't do it because I think it's too risky. So I'm the same with journal writing. It's not something that I'm advocating for. It's like all the other stuff. My thoughts, everything I do is using AI kind of for getting conferences or doing proposal writing or to do bits of writing or trying to get me a really good diagram for that journal. And then I can write lots about it because it's converged all my other work.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's brilliant. Does anybody have any more questions? Happy to answer them for you if you have any. Okay, we have a question from Sandra. One moment. I'm just going to unmute you there, Sandra. Yeah, go ahead. You can unmute when you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Zeta, thank you so much. You've asked about our fears. My fears are just that the whole thing is so daunting now, and it's knowing where to even start to use apps and to find ones that are ethical and efficient, and even just to trawl through the myriad of information that's there. I suppose it's just knowing where to start and trying to keep up with it all. And also, thanks for sharing your slides. And I was hoping to go back through them, but when I clicked on the link on the Padlet, it's saying this file is too large to view online. So
yeah, I'll fix that. I'll put them up on some other drive to make sure that you can have access to them. I'll give them to Pat.
Thank you. Yeah.
But just to deal with the fear, Sandra, I think some part of the fear is first to acknowledge it and not to think that you need to keep up with everything. Some of these things are hidden within our apps already.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore they're like, as we've improved, or as the large ed tech companies and all the companies like Teams or Microsoft, they've converged for both industry and academia. So a lot of these things, in my view, are converging, and we don't need to be evaluators of every tool. We just have to pick back to kind of what do we think is inefficient in our workflow and say, well, I'd like something that makes this more efficient. And then just look at 2 or 3, pick one and start to use it, or to get some good advice, as I say, from Blue Sky or from LinkedIn, to see what other people. I don't like reinventing the wheel. I don't think there's any need for it at all. And I don't think we are blown away from lists of things that do this, lists of things. I'm a real one for just ignore them. Let them fly over your head. And I'm very honest here. I don't think that we should be overwhelmed. We've enough going on. We still have to empty the dishwasher and make the dinner. I think that we need to be cognizant that we need shortcuts for some things and not for others. And there's loads of stuff out there now that we can apply.
Okay. And it's great to hear from somebody like you who has all the expertise, to make recommendations, because otherwise then you're trying to find, well, where do I get a reliable source to find out where the good stuff is and so on, So I have found this series of talks very useful too. So.
Great, because as I said, on governing body and academic council, they're all very fearful too about having students up for cheating all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're at with this. We don't have experience and wisdom, that model of like, well, the last time I dealt with this is what happened. You know, but eventually we will.
Yeah.
We'll, like, as the humans in this equation, we'll be able to say, I have a colleague who really worked hard and resolved this with a solution that met everybody's needs.
Yeah. And of course, the answer is to use AI effectively as a tool, you know, not to put our heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't
don't
exist.
Put our heads in the sand. Like, someone had a lovely metaphor with that was the guys, I think, was it the guys with the bird with their head in the sand, the next bird looking at the crow, looking at bits, and the next bird flying away so fast that they weren't able to figure out what tool to use, you know. And it was really clever, I felt. But that's why sometimes, as I said, you have to go back to look at those metaphors and see where you land on this. Make a decision as to where you feel comfortable, and your colleagues and your students.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zeta.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. We just have a question from Catherine when you're ready. Kate, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Hi, Zeta. That was fascinating, to be honest. And just one quick question, actually. What would you recommend for initial analysis of survey data? So like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, at the moment, because even just ChatGPT has evolved so much over the last 6 months, what I'm doing myself is I'm pushing things into there and asking them to come up with different kind of visualizations, and then transforming it into text, and then using napkin AI as well with that. So I know a colleague of mine says that they much prefer Gemini, you know, but so I suppose I'm still at the experimental stage as well, you know, so it depends. COVID, what was it? I was trying to remember actually at the start of this thing. I have a book at head. Like, so for the systematic review for big documents, it was Covidence I was thinking of using, but that's not for the question that you're talking about with the data analysis. So yeah, no, I would definitely just go with a comparative thing of two. And then I'm expecting that Navivo and them will have add-ins. Do you use Navivo?
I do, yes.
And is there an add-in now, an AI add-in?
I know I haven't actually used it in the last while, so I'm not sure.
I think I'm waiting. So sometimes I kind of go, well, I guess they are the experts for that kind of thematic analysis. So I'd be kind of waiting to say somebody somewhere is doing this. I just need to find it. You know?
Yeah.
And I would go back to people, like I would try to find a couple of my gurus that I follow, and I'd say, or a paper or two where they've recently done it. And then I would go back and practically use whatever they have and do an analysis using two, and see what one I'm more comfortable with. So Navivo would possibly be where our Navivo equivalent.
Yeah.
Definitely have add-ins.
It was for quantitative findings, so for Qualtrics or...
Yeah, Qualtrics, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned one there, Wolframa.
Yeah, Wolframa for the math side of things.
How do you spell that? Just because I don't trust the text to speech.
1 second now. I bet you somebody on the call knows better than I do. Actually, Damien from Wolfram Alpha's given me here now. Add in that Wolfram, I thought it was. I'll put it up on the Padlet afterwards, if that's okay, Catherine.
That'd be great. Thanks a million. Thank you.
Catherine, I can also connect you with it. It's a plugin that you can link in actually through ChatGPT. So, and if I'm correctly, please feel free to correct me. But it's really doing kind of quantitative rather than qualitative things. So dealing more with checking numbers and things. But I can connect you to that, Catherine.
Thanks a million, Catherine. Thank you.
I knew somebody like Catherine would have a better answer than me.
No, not at all. There was a question there as well. It said, coming back to your earlier comment around systematic literature review, was there an AI tool that you found useful?
Yeah, Covidence has an AI add into it now too. I'm sure it's Covidence, isn't it? systematic reviews. It was Kitchener that had that paper. Let me just see. One of my students that's looking at autism and accident and emergency, yeah, confidence. But there's still loads of manual intervention required with that, because you have to make a decision to include or to exclude. And that's where you look at the metadata as to, and in quantitative, it's so important.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Zeta. You're very, very good. Very, very interesting. Really enjoyed the talk. Guys, we are going to record. We've recorded the talk, so we hope to have it up online later, either today or tomorrow. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We can pass on the questions sent to Zeta. I'm sure she'll be happy to get back to us. Brilliant. So just to finish up, thank you, Zeta. It's been wonderful, and we'll hope to hear from you again, perhaps, maybe soon.
Thanks for the invite, Pat.
No worries.
We'll have more time at the beach, as I said. That's the intention.
Absolutely. I hope to see you there sometime. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.